explore how to overcome our cycles of self-sabotage. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found of all places on Reddit. It was asked, self-sabotage and feeling no sense of control. The individual wrote, "Hello, I'm a teacher who has meditated for short periods before, benefited from it, but did not continue for some reason." So, spoiler alert, I've already read to the end, and this person has been diagnosed with ADHD. So, ADHD is not a character flaw. It's a different neural type. Our culture is organized around all-typical or neurotypical. And it's become very, very intolerant for neurodivergent, even though throughout the ages, the greatest luminaries have been neurodivergent. Round pegs, destined to never fit into a square hole. So right off the bat, if you're neurodivergent, it is not a disorder to be cured. It is a neurotype to be understood and worked with. When we know what our strengths and weaknesses are and we work with them, life can be much more manageable. I'm reminded of the fable of the ugly gosling. The ugly duckling. And it turns out, spoiler alert, that the duckling wasn't a duckling, it was a gosling. And it grew into a beautiful, beautiful swan. But as long as a swan is judged by the standards of a duck, it's going to seem like a misfit or like it's willfully disregarding norms. I'm reminded of something explained by Albert Einstein, and forgive the paraphrase. But a fish will forever feel itself a failure if it judges itself by its ability to climb a tree. Squirrels are lovely and fish are lovely, but they are not the same. To judge a squirrel by fish standards or a fish by squirrel standards is folly. A few people are malicious. Most people are just lazy-minded. But if someone tells you that who you are is not good enough and you must pretend to be someone else, you have to fake it to make it, thank them for their time and then scurry away because their advice is toxic. Let's continue. I avoid consistency and become overwhelmed by being consistent. Yes, a ADHD brain is wired differently. Just as it is easy to scoop up water with a ladle and virtually impossible to scoop water with a sieve or a strainer, similarly, we have trouble producing and holding onto and using ADHD. People who have ADHD have difficulty storing and accessing and using dopamine. And without dopamine, our brains don't work properly. When interviewed about the apparent genius exhibited by ADHD individuals when given free rein in a Montessori-esque education where they literally just follow their dopamine, they exhibit genius-like competency in multiple areas. It could be literature, it could be composition, it could be artistic pursuits, it could be music, it could be sculpture, it could be drawing, it could be singing. But when they are forced to follow a schedule, all of them their light goes out. They fall apart. This is not if it's one person out of 100,000, that might be psychological. But if it's if it's just under 10% of the world population in every culture on every populated continent, and they all have the same set of symptoms, just with different ratios, then it's most likely not psychological. It's physiological. Yes, physiological with psychological symptoms, but physiological. Same thing with cluster B personality disorders. All narcissists act like they're playing from the same playbook because it's a physiological disorder, and that's where their brains are moving. And it's very, very predictable. It doesn't mean they've all, are literally playing from the same playbook. It just looks that way because the psychological ramifications of the exact same physiological disorder conform to a pattern. Same thing if someone contracts the mumps or the flu, or heaven forbid, COVID. There's a certain symptom set that is statistically relevant and observable. So those things are clues to tell us of what's going on. And to treat someone who's having difficulty with consistency as if that was a character flaw is going to do much more harm than good. The individual wrote, I got out of a stressful academic semester just recently and finally get to focus on things I actually enjoy for the first time in a while. I hear you. It's funny. I remember as a kid being told I was lazy, but when I was left to my own devices during summer break, I got up every morning, went on a long bike ride, and then spent my afternoons overhauling neighbors' bicycles for free while listening to classic rock. And when I couldn't fix something, I would go to the store, buy the manual, and reverse engineer it. Just left to my own devices, I was incredibly productive. When I was forced to conform to a schedule, I was starving for dopamine. So I'm right there with you. I completely understand. Let's continue. Nevertheless, I feel stuck. I feel like I have no control over the life I lead. And the answer is you feel that way because you don't. The majority of the world around us is populated by people who are ignorant of ADHD, either willfully or haphazardly. Many psychologists or physicians many psychiatrists or physicians treat ADHD as a pathology that can be controlled with a medication. Sadly, the long-term side effects of much ADHD medication has been shown to be deleterious. When I was in elementary school, I was prescribed Ritalin. By the time I was in high school, it did terrible things to my body. I expressed this to a physician who specializes in this, and he told me that during the Gulf War, they were just giving Ritalin to the troops like candy, hoping it would make them sharp and make them super soldiers. But for a certain percentage of them, it just undermined their entire body. It was too draining and unsustainable in the long term. Clearly, I'm not a physician. I'm not a pharmacist. I'm not a chemist. I have no pharmaceutical expertise. I just listen to the experts who I've encountered. Some psychiatrists are healers and are wise. Some are lazy-minded pill pushers who act more like a salesman than a healer. So once again, when we read the books by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, we see that there are more Inspector Lestrades than there are Sherlock Holmes. And so when dealing with someone to help us with ADHD, we need to find a truly exceptional person. And sadly, that is easier said than done. There's a phrase you probably heard before: Jack of all trades, master of none. you need to find a psychologist who specializes in both ADHD and autism, especially as it presents in females, because it presents differently in females than in men, because there are neurological differences between the genders. That's why someone can look like a boy but actually be a woman in a boy's body, and vice versa, because there are physiological differences. One that comes to mind is the density of the corpus callosum, the membrane separating the two hemispheres. On a woman and a woman's body, it is of higher density. In a man, it's of lower density. Functionally, women tend to be superior at men at multitasking. Evolutionarily, this served women. It was explained to me by a female anthropologist that stereotypically the majority of females raised children, foraged for herbs, berries, and the like, while also keeping an eye out for predators, and also talking at the same time, because the more they talked over each other, the more they would scare off the predators. So because this was an evolutionary pressure, women evolved to have neurological differences, whereas the men, who are typically the majority of the men who would archetypically go on the hunt, they had to be quiet, and they couldn't cooperate. They had to be independent, and to a certain degree. And so that created selective pressures evolutionarily as well in the opposite direction. So there are differences in the genders neurologically. One is not better, one is not worse. They're just different. And of course, there's always going to be a blurry delineation, because nothing is binary. Everything is on a spectrum. However, you want to find a psychologist to work with, a doctor of psychology who specializes in autism and ADHD as appearing in women. If you're dealing with someone who's only dealing with one or the other, for only one gender or the other, it's not going to be as beneficial for you. And it's very, very sad, but there is patriarchy, there is a male bias in society and in meditation, and it's done far more harm than good. And I know it means nothing, but I'd like to apologize for that. I know what I want, I know what I like, and what I want to be. Still, I just wait. Yes. There's an excellent phrase. I only remember the first part of it. Strike when the iron is hot. For someone with ADHD, someone like us with ADHD, we're striking when the iron is hot, which means in the moment when the dopamine is flowing, we can surf that wave and act on our brainstorms. And kind of like Tom Hanks' character in Castaway. You know, he had to count a specific wave set before he could leave the island. The timing was everything. Same thing with us. Throughout my life, over the years, I've told partners that I'm not sure whether I have brainstorms or they have me. And with the best of intentions, they said, oh, just jot your brainstorm down and attend to it later on when you have time, maybe after you've had a good night's sleep. And I've tried that in the name of experimentation, and it has always ended in tears. There is only now, there is only here. When the brainstorm comes, when the dopamine hits, we have to act on it in that moment, or it's going to pass us by. I'm not a surfer, but I tried to be one with a boogie board way back in the 70s in Malibu or Zuma. And you would sit there bobbing in the water with your board and wait for the wave. And then the wave had to come at a certain height and a certain velocity, and you had to start paddling at a certain time. And if you hit it at the wrong time, the wave would pass you by, or the wave would crash upon you. So It wasn't that there were several factors. In addition to equipment and enthusiasm and training, you also needed timing. So it is not uncommon for folks like us with ADHD who want to do something, who want to act on our talents, but are waiting for that dopamine spike. That's not psychological, it's physiological. The individual writes, I have severe ADHD and I'm either lost because of overstimulation. And by the way, overstimulation is either part of the overlapping Venn diagram between ADHD and autism, sometimes referred to as ADHD, or it is an entity unto itself, a facet of, I misspoke. Either it is overstimulation is a symptom of unique to autism, and it's not uncommon for people who have both ADHD and autism, or I should say not unheard of, or it may be a shared characteristic between the two. But I gotta tell you, number one, trying to be someone you're not because society tells you to is exhausting. I've had neighbors who are directors and producers, and they all agree that acting can be draining. And to have to act for one scene is difficult. To have to act for multiple takes of that same scene is difficult. But to have to act 24/7 every day is exhausting. So masking is exhausting, and we are told by society to mask. Trying to operate in a deficiency or with a deficiency of dopamine is exhausting. So in the state of exhaustion, we are easily overwhelmed and overstimulated by the world around us. So that is not a character flaw. It's the price we pay for genius. We could look at autism and ADHD or ADHD, all three of those disorders, as a form of being of genius, but that comes with a hefty price tag. Someone with ADHD is kind of like a Stradivarius in a vast ocean of kazoos who are being judged for not being a kazoo while being a Stradivarius. A Stradivarius is, I'm told, the optimal violin, but it has lots of needs. It's very fragile. It's great, but fragile. So when you feel overstimulated and you have to lie down, you're not being lazy. You are following a medical imperative. Drinking when you're thirsty is not being greedy. Eating when you're hungry is not being greedy. Resting when you're tired is not being indulgent. We have these impulses. We evolved these drives to keep us alive, and we ignore them at our peril. So overstimulation is a characteristic of autism, classically. Understimulation is a characteristic of ADHD, classically. So for those of us with ADHD, it's like we have two people. It's like we have two nervous systems at war with each other, where part of us needs stimulation, part of us can't handle any more stimulation, where part of us loves structure and yet hates structure, needs structure and is poisoned by structure simultaneously. This is not unique. It's difficult, but it's not unique. Many, many hundreds of thousands of people around the world struggle with this. We're still in this extreme minority, less than 10%, but you're not alone. So, and getting stuck on unnecessary, so let me just start from the top. I have severe ADHD. I'm either lost because of overstimulation and have no choice but laying down and doing nothing, or lost because of understimulation and getting stuck on unnecessary thoughts and seeking validation. So unnecessary thoughts can be thought of as hyperfixation, where you don't have a brainstorm, it has you. and you are just caught in the thrall of the brainstorm. It could be anything. It could be editing a text or composing a text or performing it, whatever. It could be anything. Think of, what's his face? The guy who gave us calculus, Newton, Sir Isaac Newton. He invented calculus over the weekend. He was having a conversation with some pals. He got very excited about a problem that couldn't be solved, and so he invented a new form of mathematics to solve that problem, without which we could never put satellites in orbit. So, wow, that hyperfixation changed humanity. That's common. That's common. The guy, I think it was Euclid? I might be mistaken. Perhaps it was Euclid. He was this great engineer / genius, and he was murdered at his desk. He was hyperfixated on a problem, completely oblivious to the enemy soldiers rushing in to kill him with spears. So there's also a thing about seeking validation. Once again, we are raised in a world that hates that which it doesn't understand. It loves sameness. It hates differentness, even if it needs differentness to survive. Anthropologically speaking, we need different neurotypes. They complement each other. Autistics and neurotypicals and ADHDers all need each other for humanity to thrive. And this is explored beautifully in a series of novels named I Am Bob. And it's wonderful. If you're a sci-fi geek, I've really enjoyed it. Perhaps you'll enjoy it as well. So masking is typical. It's not just because you're a teenager. We evolved certain certain survival paradigms. We evolved the absolute hatred of peril, pain, scorn, and anonymity. We evolved the absolute hunger for safety, pleasure, praise, and fame. Whether we know it or not, whether we admit it or not, we are wired for that. Why? Why would we be wired for that? Because evolutionarily, in a tribe, in a herd, in a pack, the most beloved member of the pack gets the most safety opportunities, the most feeding opportunities, and the most mating opportunities. Therefore, natural selection ensured that the traits, the drives, that hunger for those circumstances would be selected for in evolution. So we are all wired on some deep visceral level to hunger for the acceptance of our peers. Don't let anyone tell you not to do that. It's already wired into us. So if someone telling you not to do that is like closing the door after the cow has already left the barn. Don't do that. It's too late. We're already wired for that. We can cope with that in various ways. But first of all, recognizing that we seek validation is good. It means that you have insight and you have self-awareness. Bravo. Well done, you. But you can't just stop doing that. So the thing is to seek a peer group that gets you and that appreciates you. Not because you're quirky, but because of who you are. Because of your genius and your good heart. The individual continues. I feel really uncomfortable with the fact that I obsess over being cool this much. Forget about it. It's totally normal for a neurodivergent to mask, because to a very tragic degree in the past our survival depends on it. We are in this day and age, neurodivergents are ostracized by society. by those who either are ignorant or cruel. And so it is a survival imperative to fit in. And so it's perfectly natural and perfectly understandable. My experience with meditation was positive but messy as hell. So first of all, there is more bad instruction than good instruction on meditation. So if you found yourself tooling off on a tangent, it's not your fault. We continue. I just tried to understand what I felt in the moment, typed the feeling, and did a session on YouTube with that title. So, our job in meditation is not to understand. It's to notice as we breathe in and relax as we breathe out. We are already wired to notice during each inhalation thanks to our sympathetic nervous system ensconced within the thoracic region of our spinal cord. We already evolved to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. Now, it's not our job to label what we experience with precision. If you feel it's useful to label, then use the world's most generic label, which is the demonstrative pronoun this. That's the only label you need. Our job is not to intellectually understand why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. Our job during our exhalation, well, every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, whether we mean to or not, we are accessing our parasympathetic nervous system, which is wired for both physical relaxation and mental release. So if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable as we breathe in, because that's what we're wired to do, all of us, and if we allow ourselves to relax even a teeny tiny bit as we exhale, that's all the awareness and meditation we require. With that one tool, we can become a Buddha in just 7 days. I would love to get advice on how to approach this and how to meditate to help you narrow it down. I will try to describe my situation. Breathing and intensive visualization exercises are not really my thing so far. Good. Active visualization does more harm than good. It's going to overstimulate the aggression and anxiety center of your amygdala. Complex breathing patterns are going to do the same thing. They're going to exhaust you. Breathe naturally. There is a region in our brainstem, in our, what's it called? Reticular something. I keep forgetting what it's called. But we're already wired to breathe thanks to our medulla oblongata portion of our brainstem. Our body already knows how slow and fast or deep or shallow to breathe. Let your body breathe the way it wants to in the moment. Don't control it. Once we try to control it, it's like running headfirst into a brick wall. Also, things that are too scientific or too spiritual intimidate me. Yes, we don't need to believe in a real or imagined celestial entity. We do not need to worship or supplicate at all. Even though I banty about fancy words like sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, and the locations of various things, that's just so people know that I'm not making this shit up. That this stuff really, really exists. All you need to know is this. Every time we breathe in, we're wired to notice. So you could silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this. Every time we exhale, we're wired to physically relax and mentally release. So you could silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb is. Doing so helps to align the idiot savant that is our 3-pound supercomputer between our ears with the factory-installed wiring of our spinal cord. It's kind of like, remember Steve Urkel on Family Matters? Did I do that? Well, Steve had a good heart and a sharp mind, although he was kind of spazzy. And not necessarily the coolest kid on the block, but if you gave him a task, he could really excel. When we give our brain a task and say, hey, brain, during the inhalation, would you please silently and mentally recite this? And during the exhalation, would you please silently and mentally recite ease? All of a sudden, you'll notice your brain is fighting your autonomic nervous system less and less and less, and cooperating more and more and more. I know having expectations kind of contradict with the nature of meditation, but my goal is to gain control over my actions and lead my life in the most sustainable way for me. Well, that's beautiful, because check this out. One of the fringe benefits of harmonizing with our autonomic nervous system, noticing when you breathe in, relaxing as you breathe out, is you begin to experience a centered spontaneity. Not a scattered spontaneity, but a centered spontaneity. Now, that doesn't mean you... So, in other words, if we want to be able to surf our hyperfixations, if we want to be able to surf our overstimulation and our understimulation with the greatest of ease, if we want to surf our strengths and our weaknesses, the key is not to analyze. The key is to flow. And so here's the greatest irony. The neurodivergents, like you and I, have the greatest ease, potentially, to master the flow state. Now, this is going to look like a chaotic life to a neurotypical. That's okay. They can believe whatever they want. The people you want in your life, the friends or lovers that you want, are going to look at you, and they're not going to see a chaotic mess. They're going to see a creative genius. They are going to be in awe of your strengths. They're going to want to support your weaknesses. They are going to think you hung the moon and want to be part of your life. Those who are suited for you don't need to be convinced you're awesome. They already know. Viscerally, they know. So we are the way we survive our disorders, not by controlling our actions, but by flowing with the needs of the moment. There is a famous meditation teacher in ancient China whose name is pronounced by some Japanese as Baso or Basho. And there's a famous story, and allow me to bore you with it. Various students of various meditation masters were boasting in their teachers the way stupid men sometimes do. My teacher raises the dead. My teacher heals the sick. Well, my teacher rests when he's tired and eats when he's hungry. And at first that can seem just, what, huh? In other words, he was able to respond eloquently and spontaneously to the needs of the moment. And because he was able to surf his needs, he was able to access his genius. When we fail to meet our needs, we undermine our ability to access our strengths. So the life you hope to get from mastering and being self-controlled, mastering your actions, is the only way to get there from here is through cultivating the flow state. Now, we live in a really weird culture where people are forbidden and prevented from using their talents. You cannot use your talent until first you do that. And even in the Bible it says, the knee is not the eye is not the mouth. Every part of the body has its own purpose. But so many times in organizations, they'll say, well, you do not get to be an eye until first you master being an elbow. But that's stupid. The industrialists who forged the American education system were not trying to produce geniuses. They were trying to produce obedient factory workers and soldiers. The system that is in place serves capitalism, the capital class, not the worker class. It is anti-creative and anti-sustainability. And there are some people who want us to work until we die. They want us to work multiple jobs, unable to afford the most food, shelter, clothing, and medicine. They wish to treat us worse than slaves. And that's a very low bar. These are the architects of the high conformity, unimaginative system we find ourselves in. So of course the profoundly gifted people labeled with autism and ADHD are not going to fit in a society that rewards only conformity and mediocrity. Greatness and creativity are punished. Also, to not obsess over how to be better and just to do the thing I feel is right instead. So that requires a lot of courage. That is going to come from dancing with the flow state, and when skirk comes up, noticing it and relaxing into it in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation. Consistency is a challenge for me. Yes, it is. Consistency is your kryptonite. Oh, beautiful heart who has ADHD. Consistency is not your friend. Do not chase it. And simply look for patterns in your life. Instead of saying, what should I do right now? And learn to ask, what could be best for this body right now? Sometimes it's lying on your side rewatching your favorite rerun of Star Trek or whatever, or anime or Avatar, whatever knocks you out. Sometimes it's going to be, I'm ready to write a composition, and you just start writing. Sometimes you'll want to clean. Sometimes you'll want to cook. Sometimes you'll want to rest. Sometimes you'll want to bathe. Sometimes you'll want to stim. Go with the flow. Surround yourself with people who are wise and loving. I have a history of severe depression as a preteen and was lethargic all my life before going to therapy. Yes. Sometimes the symptoms of depression. A recent revelation is that the psychological and behavioral symptoms of depression don't have psychological causes. They have physiological causes. Systemic inflammation, gut dysbiosis, the exhaustion of our prefrontal cortex. Having to figure out how to mask is exhausting. Going through life with a deficit of dopamine is exhausting. Those things can mirror the symptoms of depression. Being overstimulated or understimulated is exhausting. So the symptoms of depression in your life are not an indictment against you, but against the society and the people in your lives who are failing to meet your needs or are actively opposing the meeting of your needs. So those are the broad brushstrokes. And once again, ADHD and autism often presents differently in women than it does in men. And so really, really draw to yourself psychologists who specialize in female neurodivergence. Be ruthless. You deserve this. Humanity needs you. Humanity needs the neurodivergence more than it thinks. And so, if not for yourself and for the sake of the survival of our species, because we are really teetering on the brink of destruction, we need the ADHDers and the autistics to be nurtured that they might use their talents to the benefit of all. So I look forward to playing with this in finer detail with you in the remainder of what remains of this morning's live stream. After approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you will not have to. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. So, because we are short on time today, we're going to dance about the practice text, a practice text that is available for free download. Just follow the links on my YouTube channel. Okay, so let us bring the dualistic 5 perceptions into the path of non-duality's awareness and letting go. Please chant with me now, non-superstitiously. I like to put my hands in the puckered palm position in front of my sternum. The reason I do that is that when I do so, it feels like real or imagined, subtle electromagnetic phenomena are coalescing within a real or imagined central channel. Do I know that's happening? Of course I don't know, but it feels that way and it seems to help. Perhaps it'll help you as well. Please chant with me. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever dualistic experience of beauty or ugliness we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to melt into the non-duality of just sights. So we can't think our way there, but we can relax our way there, which is very cool. So during our inhalation, please silently and mentally recite the noun sights. And as you exhale, please silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb ease. Now, what I'm going to do is I'd like to do this for 4 rounds. And I'm going to pretend that a round is just one inhalation followed by one exhalation. So I'm going to count these 4 rounds upon my left little finger. And I'm going to advance the tip of my left thumb during each inhalation. So please silently and mentally play with this exercise with me right now. And it's okay for your mind to wander. Your mind can break dance. That's great. Sometimes your mind's wanderings are in the background. That's cool. Sometimes it's in the foreground. That's fine. So just play with these words in harmony with our breathing and let your mind do whatever it do. Having played with this exercise for 4 breaths, let's now rest. During our inhalation, let's return to the generic label this. And during our, oops, you really can't see my cursor right now. Sorry about that. Okay, so during the inhalation, let's silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this. And during our exhalation, let's continue to silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb ease. And let's do this for approximately 12 rounds together. So even though I've been lifting my hand up before the camera, I find it more ergonomically sound to rest my hands in my lap. I invite you to do likewise if you find that comfortable as well. Please chant with me. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever dualistic experience of discord or harmony we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to melt into the non-duality of simply sound. Please chant with me. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever dualistic experience of our fragrant we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to melt into at the non-duality of simply sand. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever dualistic experience of disgusting or delicious we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to melt into the non-duality of simply taste. As we relax into, so this is our final set for this morning, and then we'll go to the closing exercise. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever dualistic experience of pain or pleasure we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to melt into the non-duality of simply sensation. So this non-duality is not something we believe in or we force. We already are wired to notice duality as we breathe in and to sense non-duality as we breathe out. These things are not permanent states. Everything is changing all the time. Seasons come, seasons go. The moon waxes, the moon wanes. The sun rises, the sun sets. Our chest swells, our chest sinks. Duality comes, non-duality comes. We allow it to flow. So what I'd like to do right now is perform a recitation. This recitation is not a prayer to a real or imagined entity, but we're going to use words to sort of exercise the neural pathways responsible for empathy and compassion and love. Please chant with me. May all minds of all beings lucid yet void no be as enlightened as a Buddha's mind symbolized by a one-syllable bija. That's this guy right here. May all speech of all beings resounding yet void no be as loving as a Buddha's speech symbolized by a multi-syllable mantra. May all forms of all beings sensual yet void no be as healthy as a Yidam archetype depicted in Buddhist statuary. May all lots of all beings appearing yet void no be as fortunate as a pure land of lore depicted in Buddhist paintings. And my friends, that's this morning's truncated practice. If you feel that I've earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10 hours or so, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.